everybody. Welcome to the Cats and Bolts podcast, episode number 23, coming to you from Podcast Junkie Studios in beautiful downtown Boca Raton, Florida. We are Florida's favorite hockey show and Florida's most watched NHL podcast. I'm your co-host, Rod Peterson. She is the other co-host, Sarina Taylor. And man, I wish we could have the cameras rolling a few minutes earlier because she was laughing a lot. I can't even... At Producer Ben, that's what it was.
Producer Ben counts us down very aggressively, and it's become a thing.
3, 2.
And we get such a kick at him, and I just shit my pants because I got so scared by that.
I'm glad you opened up with swearing because I feel like I got a swear or two that I want to drop today. Over the next 30 or so minutes, just to give you a little roadmap, I've got something in store for Carolina Hurricanes fans. We have some viewer questions that we're going to get to, but overall... 30-some-odd minutes of NHL hockey talk with a Florida twist, brought to you by our friends at DraftKings, by the way, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. The crown is yours. And I might add, they have introduced the no-sweat bet. If you watch any NHL hockey on TNT or ESPN or any of the networks, the no-sweat bet is for new customers up to $1,000. Get a bonus bet back in the amount of your original wager if your first bet doesn't hit. Just use the promo code THPN, that stands for the Hockey Podcast Network, of which we are members of, and that is at DraftKings. Also, Beach House Pompano and Boresco. So we're going to open up talking about the two teams that we talk about every week here, the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning. And number one, Sarina, I want to look at the week that was for the Florida Panthers. You and I, we were at games of both teams 2 weeks ago. You were able to catch one Panthers game this week. In reverse chronological order, here's the Panthers week since we were last on air. A 1-0 loss at Carolina. A playoff game, no doubt. And then back here for a 3-2 overtime win over Washington. And then beat Buffalo 3-2 on Tuesday night. And they stand number one in the Eastern Conference as we sit here today. So that's not a bad week. What are our thoughts? I know you have some on the Capitals and Ovi. But on the play of the Panthers, how do you feel?
I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best I've seen the Panthers play. It's not. I didn't watch the game against Buffalo. I was working and I was busy and whatever, but watching the game against Washington, like even you said to me, this is a different team without Tkachuk. Mm-hmm. It was just was not a very entertaining game. The third period kind of spiced it up, but for the most part, I really don't feel like anybody got their money's worth that game. I don't really feel like, I said, this is the best I've seen the Panthers play. They're beating crappy teams by 1 goal. Yeah. Not because they're not capable, it's just not where they're at right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I really enjoy the back and forth with fans of both teams. That's one thing that's been the hallmark of my career is I like to be accessible for fans. I like to go back and forth. They were really worried that Matthew Tkachuk and Gustav Forsling were hurt mildly in that 1-0 loss at Carolina, which I won't even try to pronounce the Hurricanes goalie's name, but Paul Maurice coming out of the game afterwards was literally like, did we lose? We fired 44 shots on goal, lost 1-0. I don't feel like we lost. Like he wasn't upset. And then they came home and beat Washington 3-2, but they didn't have Tkachuk in that game, and that's what I leaned over to you. It was a boring game. You talk about getting their money's worth. I had friends here from out of town that didn't feel they had their money's worth. And you didn't get the best Alex Ovechkin. He was pointless and -1 in that game. The guy that's 56 goals shy of Wayne Gretzky for number one all time mailed it in here Saturday night, I thought, at American Bank Arena.
It was very, I think the verb that I used was he was phoning it in. And like you said, you're like, they don't care. Ovi's done what he's going to do for Washington and whatever. But at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things where if you're going to go out and play, go out and play. Otherwise, sit on the fucking bench. That's what Ovi did at the World Juniors. The second they started losing, off he went. He was done. He was gone. It was over. He acted like a total baby. So I was shocked to see his career turn into what it was based on what I saw when he was a teenager. And after what I saw last night, I was disappointed. I'm like, come on, man. You don't see a guy like Wayne. Wayne didn't phone it in even up until his last game. As soon as Wayne knew he was done, he was done. And Ovi, it's embarrassing because the fans are going to see Ovi in what some think could potentially be his last year. It has to be his last year, the way we saw him play. But I was like, he's conserving his energy. You can tell.
Yeah, there was a lot of Panthers fans going down to the glass and warm up trying to get photos and videos of Ovi, thinking this might be his last trip through South Florida. And I'm kind of hoping that it is. But I first saw him play here 2015 live. And I remember calling my friends with the Capitals saying I was not impressed by his effort. That was in 2015. And I said he was running around, backstabbing people. He wasn't playing at 100%. But that's just the way that it is. Like, they literally were like, well, we love him. As he went on to 3 Hart Trophy wins, a Stanley Cup championship, a Conn Smythe. He won the Calder as top rookie. He's got it all.
He does. He does have it all. And Sergei Fedorov was another player that played like that. He didn't put in a ton of effort. I don't know if you ever saw Fedorov play live, but it was a completely different player than what I thought. He got the job done, but there wasn't as much effort as maybe you were expecting. But this is not the Ovi we've seen. He wasn't running guys like he normally does. He was just out there cherry picking when he felt like going off the ice. I was like, am I watching old timer hockey back in Glenavon? It was embarrassing.
Yeah, and on the topic of injuries, if we will, when I started this, then I distracted myself. People were writing me saying, well, I'm so worried about Chucky Tkachuk. I'm so worried about Gus Forsling. I'm like, don't worry. So Tkachuk ended up missing the Washington game. So what? Now's not the time. They can use the rest. What did Bedard miss? 8 weeks with a broken jaw? Everybody was so worried. I'm like, calm down. It'll just give him a chance to rest. He's come back better than he was before. You don't need to worry until playoff time. And when that happens, we got problems.
Well, and Forsling had a great game against Washington. He
scored the game winner.
I mean, yeah, he played really well. Of all the guys that played really well, Forsling was one of them.
So just try not to get too worried about the injuries right now. And Sarina and I will talk until we're old. And, well, I'm already old, you remind me, and gray, about the Stanley Cup Final of 2023, because that's when you need to worry. And Tkachuk had the broken sternum, and we heard about all the injuries of the Panthers. You know who we don't know who was hurt? Vegas. You think they didn't have injuries?
Well, that's what everybody says.
They don't talk about it.
Everybody's like, oh, they were healthy. They're right. Nobody's healthy in the last round of the playoffs. But yes, there's a difference between what Tkachuk was going through and what some of the other players, 100%. But everyone's injured every Stanley Cup Final. Let's just put that to bed.
Right. And that was a factor. But if the Panthers and Golden Knights were both 100% healthy, Vegas is still winning.
Yeah, definitely. Just the way they played.
It's the style of play.
Yeah, it was completely different. There were mistakes that were happening that the Panthers were doing that had nothing to do with injury that you could see. It is what it is. It's part of the game.
Moving on to the Lightning, but I do want to thank Brent Waltman, who's a regular viewer of the Cats and Bolts podcast every week. He put up 2 tickets for the Sabres and Panthers game, and Adrian Rainey was the winner. You saw I left my bell at home, or else I would ring it. Adrian Rainey won the tickets. Brent Waltman put them up. Nice little thing we got going. Thanks for retweeting, sharing, and following our Cats and Bolts account. To the Tampa Bay Lightning, you Bolts fans, thanks for sitting in this long. Here's the last week for you, which you already know, but starting last Thursday, a 5-3 loss versus Nashville, and then a 4-2 win at the New York Islanders. You look good up in the tri-state area. A 4-1 win at the Devils, but then you go to Philly and get spanked 6-2. And as we sit here today, Sarina, the Lightning are second place in the wild card. And we'll get to the trade deadline talk in a moment, but this has been the Lightning all year, up and down like a toilet seat. They don't get on a losing streak. They don't get on a winning streak.
It's kind of come to the point now. It didn't really necessarily have much to do with Vasilevsky after he came back from his injury, but I've noticed that if he has a couple of bad games, they have a couple of losses. He didn't play well against Florida here, and then who did they lose to the next game? They lost to somebody else right away.
Washington.
Yeah. 2 games where Vasilevsky was not his best.
And Ottawa. It was a streak.
Yeah. So, but then they turn it around and they score a bunch of goals in those games. It's not like they're winning games by 1 goal and only scoring 1 goal or 2 goals. They're putting in 4, 5, and 6 goals. So, I mean, you never know. Again, I still believe they're going to make the playoffs. They're too good not to, and something's going to happen in there.
As we sit here today, they have a 5-point cushion for that second wild card spot. And it's Washington, Pittsburgh that are chasing them. But Tampa's better than those teams. I'm
100%.
with you. Yeah, I think they're going to be in.
I feel like Washington, when we watched them the other night, besides Ovi, there was just some pieces missing. Oshie didn't play either because he's injured again or something. And there was just a little bit of a disconnect there. They have some glimmers of hope. There's a lot of lights that we can see in some of those younger players. And even I was looking at the roster, the difference in size. The Panthers have 9 forwards that are less than 200 pounds. 9 forwards less than 200 pounds. Washington's a much bigger team. And so they have like glimpses of, but I don't think they're going to catch Tampa.
I want to thank the Lightning fans as well that write in, and I appreciate the kind comments and the invitations to come to Tampa more. Somebody wrote in and said, your content was great. I also want to thank Brent Waltman for sending some video. He was at that same game we were in Tampa Bay, but
we had what a great atmosphere. We didn't talk about this last week. What an atmosphere at that rink. We stood outside. They start pounding music. They're calling all the fans in from outside. The energy right from being outside. It was raining, but everybody was still jazzed up. Completely different energy. I loved being in that rink. They don't have to blast the music like here. My ears are ringing for 2 days when I come home. It's so loud. It's got a different vibe here. There, they don't have to blast the music. The fans are in it from outside, and that's the difference.
You stole my 11th point. I had that actually.
Shoot, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure you're sorry.
Well, here we are, point 11.
Yeah, it was bye-bye, folks. But no,
we're done.
I was thinking this. We should have brought it up, but we had a guest last week, and we spent the time talking about Phil Esposito. I don't think we have any regrets about last week's show. And then Jeff Chikrin moved in, and he was awesome. But way back at the start of the year, it was my guy Chris from the Bronx, who also watches every day. He said, every week of this show, he says, who do you think has more fans, the Lightning or Panthers? And after coming away from Tampa, even though the Panthers won 9-2 2 Saturdays ago, it's the Lightning. It's their most recent Stanley Cups. They've got 3 all-time. Not only do they have more fans, I would say the Lightning have a lot more fans. Not just in their city, but across the state and across hockey. They do.
I feel like it's interesting. I can't really speak for if it's across the state. I have no idea. I don't think it's really anything other than a pocket around some of these cities. But their fans are definitely ready to rock.
Yes and no, but when we were in Tallahassee, when were we going through there? At Christmas. I was wearing a Lightning shirt, and I had a kid in a gas station say, "Go Bolts," and he kept walking. So, and that was in Tallahassee.
Well, maybe he's from Tampa.
Yeah, there was a connection. I'm just saying that was in Tallahassee, not in South Florida or Tampa. Anyways, moving on. So before the Sabres game, the Panthers-Sabres game on Tuesday, I got to the rink somewhat early. Worst traffic ever yet, but I got there somewhat early, and I saw this tailgating going on in the parking lot at American Bank Arena, and I thought, you know what? Why wouldn't I just walk down there and see what's going on? And I took a picture of it, and it was a bunch of young people having a great time, playing beer pong, posing for photos. I'm like, this is pretty awesome. Beautiful atmosphere, obviously, around American Bank Arena. Palm trees everywhere. It was a beautiful night weather-wise, beautiful sunset. I took a picture, and I posted, do the Panthers have the best tailgating in the NHL? I got my lights punched out by Carolina Hurricanes fans over that, like all over me, going, clearly you've never been to Raleigh. You don't get out much. Come on up to meet Kane's fan in Orlando. He'll school you on this. For the most part, they were nice. There were some that weren't that nice. And to those that weren't, I would say, slow your roll. You're not Montreal. Or I could show you Calgary in the Sea of Red in the spring, or Edmonton where they really know how to do it. But I'll take the L on this one and say the Panthers don't have the best tailgating in the NHL. And I have been to Raleigh before, by the way. But I wasn't strolling around the arena looking for a tailgate or, a hot dog. My point, I'm not sure I have one.
I was literally just going to ask, what was the point of that? Unless you wanted my opinion. That's usually what it is. Well,
I don't usually ask for your opinion, and you give it anyway. So
is that right?
Fire away.
Well, it's like I said to you off the air. It was like, how many Carolina Hurricanes fans are actually watching? Like, how many do they actually have that would be upset about that? But you also got to remember, too, not every team in the league has the ability to have that type of parking lot. If you ever go to a game in Edmonton, they don't have one big parking lot like we do here. They don't have that in Tampa. You're downtown in those rinks. Winnipeg, Calgary, Vancouver, those rinks do not have big parking lots like they do here. So, and Carolina, you have the ability to have that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of people that sit out here and tailgate.
There's a reason you're not on Twitter, because you know that it can be a toxic waste dump for people, right?
Can be. It is. Twitter is the biggest waste of time in the history of the world.
So I'm on there largely for entertainment. So a Hurricanes fan, again, I can take the L. I'm a big boy. My feelings weren't hurt. But some guy wrote, this dude started a nuclear war and didn't even mean to. And I'm like, right? All I said was, do the Panthers have the best tailgating? And here's a photo. Because I don't know. You lived in L.A., Anaheim for over a decade. Do they have any?
There's no tailgating there. Well, LA is the same thing. It's downtown. There's no big parking lots, and I wouldn't stand outside in downtown Los Angeles cooking a hot dog.
You get killed.
Be like, shanked. But in Anaheim, it's the same thing. They don't. They just park. Half the time, people are late for the game because of the traffic. Mm-hmm. You get there, you get in, go straight in. Nobody's messing around.
Well, it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, too, because we're talking about NHL hockey, not NFL or college football, which I understand that's Carolina's thing. I have no idea who has the best tailgating in the NHL. And the funny thing was, some Blues fan writes and says St. Louis has entered the chat with photos of all of theirs.
That's awesome.
Yes. Well, it when you say how many are watching, more than you would think. So that moves me on to point 5, and that is we were going to do the tailgate party at American Bank Arena on March the 9th when the Flames were here. But we've decided, put our heads together, and if you can show the puck in front of Sarina, Benny, that's the Flames, the Lightning and the Panthers. Puck right there. Why would we not do it when the Lightning are here, when the Cats and Bolts are playing? Fits quite well, right?
That was actually Brent's idea. We can't even take credit for that because we talked about that game on the 9th because it was a 4 p.m. start. So we're like, let's do it then. And Brent's like, why don't you guys do it the following week when Tampa's here? Of course, let's do that. It's a 6 o'clock start. So it's going to be hopefully 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and the gates will open, as she says, 4 o'clock they open it. So can I say that the tailgate party is brought to you as well by Beach House Pompano and Beresco? Because, well, actually, Thad has told me he won't be there because he's got to work. But it's still brought to you by the Beach House Pompano, a scenic rooftop restaurant on the shores of Pompano Beach, and Beresco, a tropical outpost serving only the freshest tacos and lush jungle vibes, located at 225 North Pompano Beach Boulevard. When we have live guests here on the Cats and Bolts podcast, they get gift cards from Beach House Pompano and Beresco. Now, for what you really came here for, at least that's where the questions came from, the true hockey fans. And I can't believe that you have not met Jeff yet from Estevan. He's your biggest fan, aside from your dad. And he wants to talk about the trade deadline. You understand, people are they're frothing at the mouth in Canada at the NHL Trade Deadline. And hardcore NHL fans here, like in the States. What do you think? Are you?
Not usually. I don't really give it too much thought because, like I've said this once, and I'll say it till the day I die. You can never put any stock into what's going to happen or the rumors that you hear. There's always speculation, but nobody really knows what's going on behind the scenes. So what's the point of putting any energy into it until it happens?
Well, now would be a good time to talk about your business. Just mention what you do and how you don't have a lot of time to think about who might go where in the NHL.
Well, yeah. I mean, I run my own online coaching company, Fitness and Nutrition. That's what I do. So I'm busy all the time. I just don't have the energy like to be on Twitter or to be on whatever. You know, I'm on social media a lot to try to grow my company and everything. But yeah, I don't really look at a lot of that kind of stuff just because I don't have the time. Sometimes if we sit down and chat about it, it's like, oh yeah, that person's eligible to be sure. It's a good conversation. I like talking about it.
Well, so this is morphing. And by the way, the people that wrote in with their questions all had to do with the trade deadline. However you want to mold them all together. But one was like, what's the Panthers' needs? What's the Lightning's needs? And I kind of get all that. But let's just, for instance, look at Florida. I'll be honest with you. They're the number one team in the Eastern Conference as we sit here today, flirting overall with the number one record in the NHL. Why would you think they need anything? I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's always, I think sometimes fans and management alike look for like, we just got to get that one guy. Everybody's just missing that one guy. And what happens if so-and-so gets hurt and all that kind of stuff. And so that's potentially, I can understand where the fans are coming from. You know, the fans here truly believe that they didn't win the Stanley Cup last year because they had injuries. So they're like, okay, what can we do to fix this problem? What do we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again if a guy gets injured? So it's one of those things that it just depends on what the team needs. But I think the biggest thing that nobody ever really talks about is who's available that's going to fit in your salary cap. That's the biggest problem.
That's a good one. But again, we're talking about the Panthers. We'll get around to the Lightning. And you could go through their whole roster, but literally they're two of the best goalies in the NHL. They darn sure don't need goalies. And I can't speak for the Lightning, but I know this for the Panthers. They have a list of black aces, healthy scratches every night that practice with the team every morning. They got extra bodies as it is. Do you know what I mean? Josh Mahura is one of my favorite Panthers. Just former Regina Pat is an example of one that played a lot last year. He's not hardly playing at all this year.
We actually talked about that, didn't we, about Mahura? I feel like something changed in his style. I'm not sure if it was just from not playing for so long or what happened with him, but I feel like he's a little bit of a different player. Granted, when you look at the start of this season, the Panthers came in with a different mentality because they had a lot of injuries on defense. So their style of play had to be completely different, getting the puck out of their own zone. So is that why Mahura is playing different? I'm not really sure. Is it because he's not playing as much? I don't know, but I think he's a great hockey player.
He is a great hockey player. This is a different blue line from last year, too. Radko Guda's gone. We were watching Mark Stahl the other night with Philly gone. It's completely reworked. But I guess my point is, again, we're asking, what do they need? And I don't think they need a damn thing. Now, having said that, a guy wrote into my regular television show that we do daily and said, why are they always looking for scoring? Why is a defensive forwards not at a premium at trade deadline time? And while it's a good question, my thinking is you win games based on scoring goals. That's why the offensive guys are at a premium. That's how I would answer that.
Yeah, I hear what he's saying, though.
Yeah.
I think just from playing devil's advocate, he's like, how come everybody always talks about good defensemen as opposed to an offensive defenseman?
Yeah.
You know, like, I think that's just the point. And it's not a bad point, right? Like, who wouldn't want a guy like a Morgan Rielly on your team? I'd love to have Morgan Rielly. You know, I think he can produce in a lot of different places. But, yeah, I hear the point. He's right.
Wow. The mantra from management around trade deadlines is better is better. They're always trying to make their team better. She just said that. And then they dump it in the coach's lap and said, you make this work. You make the culture work. You figure it all out. And I know a lot of coaches that would rather not have their room tinkered with at all. And by the way, the top two trade bait players on TSN's list are defensemen, Noah Hannafin and Chris Tanev of the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, I think that's Calgary's got nothing to lose. They're going to dump somebody. Hannafin, I think, would be a good fit anywhere. And I think anybody would benefit from Hannafin or Tanev, to be honest.
They're great players.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Florida get Jacob Chychrun. But again, when his dad sits here and says, I don't want him traded at all, I'm kind of going, why is he on the list then? Again, back to fake news and a bit of a waste of time. Now, moving on, I had somebody say to me the other day, what do you guys talk about on there? This show. And I said, NHL talk with a Florida twist. But we will look at the other NHL news items, and there are two from the last week. And I can't wait to get Dale Talon in here. People still say, particularly Jeff and Estevan, our best show is when we had Dale Talon on.
My favorite.
Yeah, former GM of the Panthers and the Blackhawks. So if you watch, the reason I bring this up is he was in Chicago Sunday for the jersey retirement of Chris Chelios. Number 7, raised to the rafters at the United Center, and they showed Dale on television, right? He was beside, I think, Marian Hossa and Denny Savard. But Patrick Kane, the former Blackhawk, goes into Chicago, scores in overtime with Detroit, and spoils the party. You and I have barely seen each other this week. I haven't talked to you about this.
It's been so great.
People have literally said, that's rude.
You set yourself up.
Not
what did
really.
You think?
Well, listen, if you don't want to see me, we can make that happen even more so.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Blackhawks media were upset that Patrick Kane was allowed to come in and spoil the party. I guess Chelios said to Kane before the game, please don't steal my thunder. I would hope he was joking. And Kane comes in and scores in overtime, and Detroit wins.
What do you mean?
On Chelios night.
He's allowed to come in? Like what? What is
They let it happen.
Sure, but too bad. So wait, what did they expect? He's jazzed up. He's ready to go. He's back playing in Chicago. He was excited. They put a really cool video tribute up there for him, of course.
Well, it was a figure of speech. They allowed it to happen. I'm not saying he wasn't allowed in the arena. I'm not sure what you were getting at there. What do you mean?
Well, they said, how could they allow him to come in? Like, what do you mean, allow him to come in? They didn't have a choice.
Well,
he went in.
Well, I guess my point that I was trying to get at before being interrupted like 3 times was...
If I don't interrupt...
She'll never speak. So somebody actually said, after I couldn't believe it. They said, why did they have Detroit as the opponent on Chelios night? You knew Kane was coming, and you knew this could happen. Why wouldn't you pick another opponent? And I'm like... Have you not been around? These games are planned pretty much a year in advance. If at the very least in the summer. Kane didn't sign in Detroit till December. How would they know? It was a coincidence. Like guys like Dale Talon flying from here to there would have had their flights booked and everything for this date. Like to be honest, I liked that Kane went in there and scored. I thought not only did he not spoil the party, he made the party. It was a great story. It was, to me, aside from Winnipeg, which we're getting to, that was the highlight of the week for me.
I mean, I don't know. They probably don't set the jersey retirements that far in advance, would be my guess, because they probably got to work it out with Chelios. But Chelios probably picked, let's do that day.
Well, plus he played for Detroit, as somebody pointed out to me, too.
Sure, totally.
It actually was a great... You're just mad you lost. That's the point out of the whole thing. Which
you should be used to by now this year.
Chicago. Well, that's the whole other thing that people couldn't figure out. And I've never been to the game in Chicago. I told you it's on my bucket list. But why was there such a huge ovation, when Kane scored for Detroit in overtime in Chicago? The place went nuts. Is it because A, they love Kane, B, they want Chicago to lose to maybe win the lottery again, the draft lottery, or a combo of that, or something else?
What is this, Mike Keenan running the show? No, they like Kane.
They just like Kane.
It's like when Wayne scored in Edmonton when he was playing for the Kings. The Oilers, of course.
Well, on his first return back, it didn't go well, but we're not going to talk about that, right?
Well, whatever, but it's just like he broke the record in Edmonton. Of course they're going to cheer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they like Kane. That's all it is.
Now, the big, way bigger story than this is, if you're a hockey fan, I don't care where you are, you should care. Gary Bettman had to go into Winnipeg on Tuesday and address the media because one of the owners, the chairman of the Jets, Mark Chipman, said on Friday that the ticket sales, they're the second lowest drawing team in the NHL, the Winnipeg Jets. He said the owner, Mark Chipman, said this is not sustainable long term. It sent people so around the bend in Winnipeg, the Bettman had to come in and quell their fears on Tuesday. There's a lot of stats and figures that we could get here today to realize or emphasize how dire this situation is for the for the Jets. But I guess we can set it at this. I don't feel they're going to be there long term. The NHL has outgrown Winnipeg financially. 10 years, are they still there?
I don't know.
That's a long time, 10 years.
It's tough. I mean, the thing with Winnipeg is this. It's not that they don't have the fans to support the team, but there's clearly a disconnect with the people that can afford to go to the games now versus before. Everybody was all jazzed up when the Jets got their team back. Ticket prices were probably a lot more comparable to what people could afford based on the median income in that city. And there's a lot of games. There's 41 games to fill the seats. It's not like the CFL, well, they'll get 40, 50,000 people to a game because there's 9. There's a lot there. And I just think, like you said, I think you put it perfectly, they've outgrown the city financially. And it sucks. Sucks because most of those smaller market Canadian cities, even the ones that don't have NHL teams, are not growing financially. They're not. They're staying steady, probably, but when you have a professional sports team that the economy just needs to be boosted and it's not getting boosted. So these guys aren't going to hockey games.
I'm sorry, I'm having a tough time concentrating with all this movement around in the studio. How's that for an imitation?
I don't.
How are we doing for time, Benny? We know what are we at?
We're at 30. We're about 30 minutes in.
We're 30 minutes in? Okay. Well, just the stats on the figures. The last 3 years, the Jets season ticket base is down 27%. From like 13,500 season tickets to a little over 9,000 now. And coming up in a future episode, we'll talk about ticket prices here in Florida. Obviously, we don't have enough time to get into this ticket talk here. But when the Jets went, I heard this today. When the Jets went there from Atlanta in 2010, it was a $170 million purchase price. They're now valued at $700 million. So it's more than tripled the value of the team. The salaries have skyrocketed. And if they were to be sold right now, the Ottawa Senators went for over $1 billion, right? So the money just isn't there in Winnipeg. It was what we just said. It's outgrown the market, and it's unfortunate. I don't know that we saw this coming.
I certainly didn't.
No.
However, the trends up there kind of tend to lean toward that. Like we talked about after COVID with the CFL. Saskatchewan used to pack their stadium every single game, and it hasn't happened since COVID. And like I explained to you, the mentality I think that happened during COVID, and it even still sits with me personally, is that I don't spend my money frivolously on things like that anymore like I used to. People's mentality changes because they realize you never know when something can happen to throw you on your ass. Mm-hmm. So to go to a Jets game in Winnipeg, if the two of us went to a Jets game and sat up in the cheap seats, it probably with parking would cost us $250. We're not going to go watch the Winnipeg Jets for $250.
No, and I think, people don't understand. They're getting upset coming at me when I talk about this and say, well, sorry, Rod, but if I have to choose between feeding my family or going to the Jets, I'm going to feed my family. I'm like, good for you, bro. I applaud that. That's the smart thing to do. That doesn't change the fact the Jets can't stay there based on that mentality.
I don't care if you spend your money on a $500 pair of shoes. If that's what you want to spend your money on, do it. If you don't want to go to a hockey game, don't. It's spending that you don't have to do. It's shocking. The city of Winnipeg is not 100,000 people. There's enough people there to support it because there always was.
What do you mean there's not 100,000 people?
There's a lot more. It's not a small city, right? So there's enough people to support it, but they are choosing not to spend their money on it. So don't get all pissy if the team moves. It comes down to the fact that they're competing with the American dollar. The players get paid in U.S. funds, so that's extra money that the Canadian teams have to make up. You have teams, yes, the other teams, they sell a lot of merchandise. Look at the Leafs and the Oilers, sell a ton of merchandise. There's more going on in those cities than there is in Winnipeg. Winnipeg's like the land that time forgot. Now they're trying to figure out how to fix the problem. You can't.
And just for our viewers that aren't following it that closely, people are writing at us saying, well, what about Arizona? They're only getting 4,900 fans a game. What about Florida? All those years, they only had 3,000. We're not talking about those teams. Neither owner in those markets is whining about ticket sales or money.
Even if we were, it comes down to the owners. It's up to them.
Yeah.
Even if Florida threatened to move because they couldn't, really? Everybody be like, yeah, that's about right. In Winnipeg.
It wouldn't surprise anybody.
Right. Or Arizona. In Winnipeg, it's like, whoa. What is happening here? There's a disconnect, and how can we fix this? And as far as Gary Bettman going in there and telling everybody to calm down, it's like, would you go into Winnipeg and say your team's going to move? He'd been burned at the stake.
He wouldn't have made it out alive. So that's what he said. By the way, the commission went in on Tuesday and said it's not good, but it's not a crisis. And I would add, yet. So we've burned through our time. We will not preview the next week, other than to say what the games are. Florida's got coming up Thursday, home to Montreal, Monday at the New York Rangers, Tuesday at the New Jersey Devils, and then we'll be recording again. The Tampa Bay Lightning have Thursday versus the Buffalo Sabres, Saturday versus the Montreal Canadiens, and Thursday versus the Calgary Flames. That's all three below 500 teams. So Tampa, we better be coming back talking about 3 straight wins. And the Panthers are beating everybody. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. Sarina and Rod, thank you. Oh. Thanks to Ben and Christian. Cat got your tongue?
I guess so.
We'll see you next week here on the 3, 2, 1. We're out.